Post-watch congressional races in Illinois. The redrawn 13th includes East St. Louis, the capital city of Springfield, Decatur, and the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. Business owner and former educator Regan is the GOP nominee.
I'm running for Congress in the 13th Congressional District because I'm afraid for the future of my children and yours.
Nikki Budzinski, a former aide to the Biden and Pritzker administrations, is the Democratic nominee.
I'm running for Congress because I want to help rebuild the middle class.
The winner will help determine which party controls Congress in January. This is the Illinois 13th Congressional District Debate, presented by Illinois Public Media, WAND News, and the League of Women Voters of Champaign County. Good evening, I'm Tanisha Spain of Illinois Public Media. Thank you for tuning in for what we hope will be a very vigorous discussion this evening. In a moment, you're going to hear from the candidates, Nikki Budzinski and Regan. But first, we're going to talk about the format for tonight's debate. Each candidate will have a minute-long opening and closing statement. Once we start asking questions, the candidate who has asked the question will have a minute and a half to answer. The other candidate will have 30 seconds to respond. Then we'll move on to the next question. Both campaigns agreed to this format ahead of time. Neither candidate has seen tonight's questions. The League of Women Voters in Champaign County is timing this debate. Joining me tonight in asking questions, Brian Mackey, host of the 21st Show. That's a weekday talk show that airs on NPR stations all around Illinois. Mark Maxwell is a political editor at KSDK TV in St. Louis. And Doug Wolf, political reporter at WAND TV in Decatur. And we're going to start with a minute-long opening statement in alphabetical order of last names. Democratic candidate Nikki Budzinski, you're first.
Thank you so much for having me here tonight. I grew up middle class, and I have spent my entire career fighting for working people. Firefighters, retail workers, meat cutters. It's why I have been so proud to help lead Illinois' passage of a $15 minimum wage. And in Washington, when I helped to set up the Made in America office to prioritize American workers. I'm running for Congress because working people are struggling right now with rising costs, and I want to go to Congress to be their fighter. There are big differences between my opponent and I on this stage tonight. I will always fight for Social Security and Medicare. My opponent is supported by extremists in her party that would dismantle it. I will always support a woman's freedom to make her own decisions about her own body. My opponent does not support a woman's right to choose, and I will always fight for strong public schools. My opponent supports universal school choice and vouchers that will defund our public schools. There are really important issues that we're going to be discussing tonight, and the stakes are very high in this election. I look forward to this debate. Thank you.
Okay, and Regan.
Good evening. I'm Regan from Decatur. I have found that voters across central Illinois and across this country are looking for leaders who are going to stand up for our individual freedoms and our American way of life. We need real conservative policies that are going to get us back on track in this country, and I look forward to doing that in Congress. I didn't go looking for a political career, but this environment is begging for common sense representatives, and I know that here in Illinois we have great values that I can take along with me. I promised to have America be strong on the national stage, but also build us back up at home, putting our citizens first. Securing the border has got to be a top priority, and I will work to rein in reckless spending and make an economy that shows we can have success for all. I live here in Illinois. I am seeing the everyday struggles of my community members and fellow residents, and I want to go to Washington to work for you. If we want to see change in Washington, we have to send a new kind of representative.
Excellent, ladies. Thank you so much. All right, we're going to jump into the questions. Mark, the first one's from you.
Our first question is for Regan. Just hours ago, President Biden moved to pardon roughly 6,500 people convicted on federal charges for possessing marijuana. Illinois already legalized and decriminalized recreational marijuana for adult use. What do you think about President Biden's executive actions, and would you vote to legalize marijuana at the federal level?
Well, we absolutely have the legalization of marijuana here in the state of Illinois. I'm surprised by President Biden's executive action into decriminalizing marijuana. That'll be a discussion that will have to happen at the federal stage. I do know that a number of our law enforcement are finding struggles when they're trying to reduce crime on our streets, and drugs are going to be a big part of that problem. Marijuana can tend to be a gateway drug, and so we want to make sure that we are eliminating people that are going to be drug users and then potentially having crime. I have heard conversations here in my own district, as it is legal here in Illinois, about those seeking the use of medical marijuana and wanting to be able to have nearby access to those things. It's obviously good tax revenue for us here in central Illinois. So I think that the legalization of marijuana on the national stage is not something that I would be in favor of.
Okay, Nikki, you've got 30 seconds to respond.
Well, right now, Mark, at the federal level, methamphetamine, cocaine, they are considered to be the same they're the same schedule as medicinal marijuana. Medicinal marijuana and cocaine are at the same schedule. What the Biden administration, I think, is looking at is how we're looking at prosecuting drug offenses, and the fact that right now at the federal government, cocaine is considered less severe than medicinal marijuana. I think that's worth revising and taking a look at.
Thank you so much, Nikki. Okay, we're going to Brian for the next question.
And this one is for Nikki Budzinski. Do you support, speaking of executive action from the president, do you support President Biden's plan to forgive $10,000 to $20,000 in student loan debt? And what can Congress do to make sure that future students are not saddled with so much debt?
Look, I don't, because I don't think that that is the best way to tackle college affordability. I think that I'm concerned about how we would be paying for that type of an initiative. I've also been very proud to tour a lot of different community colleges throughout the 13th Congressional District. I very much believe that a four-year college degree should not be the only pathway to the middle class. I think we should be looking at lifting up union apprenticeship programs. Because I worked in the labor movement, I've had the opportunity to actually visit and see firsthand what it means to go through a union apprenticeship program. Giving people the skills training they need that doesn't saddle them with debt, I think, is something that's really important. I think we also need to be looking at how students, they should have the ability to refinance their interest. If I can refinance my interest on my mortgage, students should be able to refinance the loans that they have taken out for their college degrees. I think that's something that's a more common sense approach to helping everyone with college affordability. But I think really important is to emphasize, especially in the 13th Congressional District, where we do have great four-year universities, but we have community colleges as well, that it's not just a four-year degree that is a pathway to a middle-class career and lifestyle. That's something that we need to be looking at for two-year associate technical degrees and union apprenticeship programs.
Okay. Regan, you have 30 seconds to respond.
I absolutely disagree with the president's executive action in student loan forgiveness. It remains to be seen if it will be upheld in court to even be allowed. But absolutely, we need to take a look at how that makes people that perhaps didn't take out a student loan or have worked really hard to pay off that student loan debt, so that it's not an offense to them. There must be alternative pathways past high school, and I think that a lot of our community colleges and our four-year universities are encouraging those folks to consider other options.
Regan, thank you. All right, next question is from Doug.
And this question is for Regan. Russia has been at war with Ukraine since February. The United States has invested billions of dollars in assisting the Ukraine government. Should the United States set a limit on how much this nation will spend on that war?
Well, I know that as a country that values sovereignty, we have had a vested interest in defending Ukraine against the onslaught from Putin against their innocent civilians. This is absolutely a humanitarian crisis. I know that we have sent military aid, we have sent financial aid, but as a nation that must defend itself and also support its own citizens, I have heard from many on the campaign trail, especially hardworking families here in the 13th, as to how many dollars we will continue to send to Ukraine. Just the most recent continuing resolution passed did include an additional package to Ukraine, but I think the biggest concern for Congress is going to be what are those limitations and what are those checks and balances when we are sending millions and billions of dollars to Ukraine.
All right, Nikki, you've got 30 seconds.
I think, Doug, we always have to be mindful of spending, but I think very important in this situation is that we're standing up to Putin and we're standing alongside the Ukrainian people who are fighting valiantly to maintain their sovereignty. I think that's critically important, and the United States needs to be an ally in that effort. I think one of the things, in addition, that is exposed during this Ukrainian war is the need in the United States for us to be doing investments here, specifically around energy, domestic energy production. I think is critically important because we need to be independent of people like Putin.
Gotta stop you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, next question is for you, Nikki. According to Customs and Border Protection, U.S. border agents have had 2 million encounters with migrants at the U.S.-Mexico border so far this fiscal year. That's a new record. What can be done in Central and South America to slow that flow?
Well, I think that we do need border security. That's incredibly important, but big, and I think more broadly, we need to actually pass comprehensive immigration reform. What we're seeing is the federal government not solving a solution that is a national issue. I think we need to be finding a pathway, a legal pathway for citizenship for those that are looking to come into the United States. You know, I worked again in the labor movement, and the AFL-CIO and the Chamber of Commerce came together about 10 years ago on a framework to actually pass comprehensive immigration reform. If those two entities can do it, I really believe that Congress can too. It's something I want to be committed to doing when I get to Congress. But I do think one of the things that is tragic about, I think, Washington is the polarization and the extremes. There are extremes on the Republican Party. Many of them who are supporting my opponent have moved away from a solution to comprehensive immigration reform. This used to be an issue that had bipartisan support. We need to get back to that because this is a real issue. It's a humanitarian crisis. We need to support and secure our border, but we need to find a comprehensive solution to our immigration crisis.
Okay, Regan, you have 30 seconds to respond.
This Biden administration should fully own both the humanitarian and the national security crisis that's happening at our southern border. We are, in fact, a nation of immigrants, and we have always welcomed those to come for a better life here in America. But we currently have record homelessness. We have children going hungry in our own communities. So we need to make sure that we have the resources available to support our citizens as well. I do believe that we have some great policies that can work to keep the migration count down, such as Remain in Mexico and Title 42.
Okay, next question comes from Brian.
Thank you, Tanisha, and this is for Regan Deering. Earlier this year, as you know, the U.S. Supreme Court overturned the precedent Roe against Wade. It was 50 years old. It's a decision that had guaranteed a constitutional right to abortion in America. Access to abortion currently remains legal in Illinois. There is federal legislation, though, that's been introduced that would create a national ban at 15 weeks. Would you support that? And if so, with what exceptions?
Well, this discussion is a very personal one for me. I was given a chance at life and adopted at just a few days old by a very loving family. So I have a brave birth mother who chose to take advantage of her situation and her support network to give me life. And I have subsequently brought my own children into this world. And so the conversation is very personal to me. My opponent and her supporters have spent millions of dollars in attack ads and misinformation talking about my extreme stance as a pro-life candidate. I have, in fact, gone on the record that I supported the overturning of Roe v. Wade to make it a state's issue, which is where I think it belongs. And I have been on the record opposing a national ban. I will continue to advocate for women in facing crisis and families, and I will continue to advocate for the unborn. I have been traveling this district, and I would in fact think that most of us are looking for common sense restrictions on abortions. And I would challenge my opponent, Nikki, to come out and discuss if she has any exceptions. Here in Illinois, we do have very radical legislation that includes late-term abortion and fully taxpayer funded. And I, as a mother, in fact, find the most offensive legislation to be that we are removing parental notification for minors who are facing a very extreme medical medical procedure, and I cannot imagine parents not being able to be privileged to that information. It's going to be an increase in human trafficking, and it's just not common here in Central Illinois in our value system.
Okay, Nikki, you have 30 seconds.
This is a fundamental difference between my opponent and I, for sure. And I would just say that I don't believe that the women of the 13th Congressional District believe that my opponent would not vote in support of a national abortion ban when she said she was thrilled when Roe versus Wade was overturned. I have been consistently throughout my life very supportive of choice. It's a woman's choice between her doctor and herself as to what she does with her body, and I think that freedom should remain with that woman. I trust women to make that decision, and I'll be supporting that in Congress.
Okay, we'll have to leave that one there. Next question is for Mark.
We'll direct this question to Nikki Budzinski. A 2016 Brookings Institute study found that low-income women are 5 times more likely than affluent women to experience an unplanned pregnancy. But the Hyde Amendment, as you well know, sponsored by former Illinois Congressman Henry Hyde, restricts using federal taxpayer funds for most abortion services. So how would you balance that right of women in poverty to have equal access to the same health care options as affluent women with the right of taxpayers to object to how the government spends their tax dollars?
It's a good question. So what I would say, Mark, is that I will always oppose legislation that will put the life and the health of a woman at risk in Congress. I think this is a very important issue and discussion that we're having because there are women out there that are scared. I know women that I have friends that have made very difficult decisions on this issue, and I think they should have the respect and the ability to make that decision between them and their doctor. It's very deeply personal, and I don't think that a politician should be in that room. I think that my opponent believes that a politician should, and I think that's fundamentally wrong. In this district is Fairview Heights and in Granite City, where there are 2 clinics after the state of Missouri passed their trigger law, outlawing abortion even in the cases of rape and incest. Those 2 clinics in the 13th Congressional District have already seen 366% increase in women from out of state seeking health care. And so I think this is a very relevant and pertinent issue to certainly the women throughout the 13th District, but also health care at large and what this decision with Dobbs has meant. It's very scary. My opponent is supported by the Susan B. Anthony organization and Illinois Right to Life, which they are pushing for a national abortion ban, and they also don't believe in choice even in the cases of rape and incest. I consider that extreme.
Quickly, before we move on to Regan's response, would you repeal the Hyde Amendment?
I said I would never vote. I would always vote against legislation that would put the health and the life of a woman at risk.
Doesn't sound like an answer to me. I absolutely would support keeping the Hyde Amendment in place. In a post-Roe world, it's never been more obvious that taxpayer dollars should not be going to fund states and women crossing borders where there are different legislations. I continue to stand on my record as far as being against a national ban. I have never found myself to be a liar, and I don't intend to start when I enter Congress. So I have been on the record talking about my pro-life stance, and I will continue to support women and children proudly.
Right. Okay, now we have a question for both of you from a viewer in East St. Louis.
Hi, I'm Chastity Cosby, and I stay in the city of Belleville, Illinois. And my question is, how can we improve the maternal mortality rate within our country?
Now for context, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Black women died during and following pregnancies at 3 to 4 times the rate of white women. Regan, we're going to start with you for that answer.
Well, certainly maternal health and the safety of women who are choosing to carry their children to term is really going to be important. At the federal level, we obviously want to make sure that we have funding. The city of Belleville is in our district in the southern half, and I know that we have a lot of rural healthcare systems throughout our districts. We want to make sure that we have continued funding to be able to give women access to maternal health care. That's going to be very important regardless of your income level or your race. Obviously, we want to be able to support women who do choose to carry their babies to term. And I have spent my life working for families that are in low-income situations. We want to be able to continue to find them with resources such as diapers or wipes or formula, and making sure that they do have transportation to get to those maternal health care appointments. So I do know that this is absolutely a priority for all of us here in Central Illinois. We have some really wonderful public-private partnerships. I have been down to some of the pregnancy resource centers and see the abundance of resources that they have available to women, regardless of their financial situation. And I know that those places will continue to be supported as we try and encourage women to care as they can the best way possible for their children.
Okay, and Nikki, you also have 90 seconds for this question.
Yes, this is a very important issue, and I think it accurately does disproportionately impact communities of color. We need to make sure that we are creating access to affordable health care for women that are pregnant and going through pregnancy, that they have healthy food options, that they get the care that they need and the access to health care and doctors. This is something that is really important. There are safety net hospitals within the 13th Congressional District, not far from Belleville, where this viewer had asked the question. I think it's important that we support access to health care. Maternal health is incredibly important. There are really important communities within, obviously, the 13th District that could use more access to health care and affordable health care. I think that's really important. One of the things that I had the opportunity to work on, in particular in the governor's office, was I chaired the Broadband Advisory Council. We looked at telehealth. Telehealth is another way that we can provide more access to health care and health care options to women that are pregnant, and I think that's incredibly important that we be doing that, expanding options.
Excellent. Okay, next question is from Doug.
And this question is for Nikki. The COVID pandemic in 2020 caught the nation in a situation where businesses were disrupted and there were public health disputes over masking and keeping schools open. Should there be a nationwide plan, should it be adopted for when there's another pandemic in the future?
I think that's a good question. I think we were responding, the federal government was responding to a once-in-a-100-year pandemic. I think thanks to this administration, millions of people got shots in arms. It required a federal response to supporting small businesses, to getting kids back into schools safely. That was something that was critically important. And so I think for me, it's looking at it at the state level and the federal level together, how they can partner. I think one of the things that was really difficult in the previous administration, before the President Biden's administration, was the lack of a federal response, a lack of getting people PPE, making sure that people were getting access to vaccines. A once-in-a-100-year pandemic requires a federal response, and I think that's something that is critically important that we be investing in now so that we're prepared for the next pandemic that comes. Thank you.
Regan, you have 30 seconds to respond.
Well, the COVID-19 pandemic did provide an opportunity for us to learn about our ability to react to a virus that is taking over our communities. I think so many people felt the effects of the long-term shutdowns, closing our businesses, keeping our children out of school. And then we are going to be feeling the effects long-term for at least a decade, especially when it comes to our children. I know that I advocated for my children when I didn't feel like the government overreach was the best choice for my family, and I'll continue to stand up for families here in 13th.
Okay, we're going to Brian with our next question.
And this is for Regan Deering. You mentioned in your opening statement that you want America to be strong on the national stage. And I'm wondering, who or what do you think is America's primary global adversary, right? A country or a transnational group, and what should the American government be doing differently to counter that threat?
Well, I would say that on the global stage, our biggest threat is the CCP. Certainly, we have an over-reliance on the Chinese when it comes to our energy independence, when it comes to our technology, when it comes to our national debt. And so I am, of course, wanting to talk about America first. We need to bring manufacturing back here. We need to bring American energy independence here. We need to make sure that we are no longer reliant on foreign adversaries such as China. We also could talk about Russia or Japan as well. Japan is, of course, an ally. Any of our enemies, we want to make sure that we are, in fact, standing strong and making sure that we are coming to peace. We're encouraging resolutions on the global stage. So I think that when we talk about America first and we want to have our American independence, we have to look to this Biden administration, who from day one was talking about how he was going to put on an assault on the fossil fuel industry. My opponent worked as his chief of staff for the Office of Management Budget, and her first action was canceling the Keystone Pipeline. We need to be doing everything we can to encourage keeping our natural resources and our energy here at home so that we no longer become reliant on places like China.
All right, Nikki, you have 30 seconds to respond.
So desperate campaigns start lying, and I did not cancel the Keystone Pipeline in the president's administration. I will say to your question, the number one geopolitical threat is clearly China. China, we need to be making things here. It's why I was so proud when I worked for President Biden to set up the Made in America office, prioritizing American workers and American companies. You know, my opponent is from Decatur, Macon County, where Decatur is. It's the number one manufacturing county in the state of Illinois. Until she decided to run for office, I'd like to know what she was doing to advocate for American workers and American jobs. That's what I've been doing.
Nikki, thank you so much. And we have come to the end of the first half of our debate. In the next half hour, we're going to ask the 13th Congressional District about agriculture, electric vehicles, threats to bipartisanship, and more. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Stay with us.
To get to the heart of what really matters in every issue.
This country has not seen this in 80 years.
This extraordinary moment in American history.
You're making such a huge impact.
Trust is at the heart of what we do.
Washes my skin, think it's time I find my place here.
Fasten your seatbelt.
You're taking my breath away.
Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee.
Amazing. Well, what are you waiting for?
You belong here. This is your home.
What is your sense now of the humanitarian situation?
This is making me emotional.
This experience I'm going to carry with me the rest of my life.
I'll always be so grateful for everything you did for me.
Control of Congress hanging in the balance. President Biden taking on the Trump wing.
Extreme MAGA Republicans full of anger, violence, hate, and division.
Republicans counting on support from the former president.
You're going to send J.D. Vance to the U.S. Senate.
Consequential state races. Election night 2022, Tuesday, November 8th at 8 p.m. Eastern.
From the studios of Illinois Public Media on the campus of the University of Illinois, welcome back to the 13th Congressional District Debate. Good evening. I'm Tanisha Spain, again, of Illinois Public Media. Joining me in asking questions tonight, Brian Mackey. He is the host of 21st, which airs on NPR stations around Illinois. Mark Maxwell, political editor at KSDK TV in St. Louis. And Doug Wolf, political reporter at WAND TV in Decatur. And tonight, we're talking with Republican Regan Deering and Democrat Nikki Budzinski. All right, first question for this top of the hour is going to go to Mark.
We're going to lead off with Nikki Budzinski here again at the top of this half hour. A question about the economy. The Bureau of Economic Analysis says the American economy shrank by less than 1% in the first 6 months of this year. And at the same time, the recent trend has been that many businesses continue to hire people. Layoffs are at a record low. And the unemployment rate is near the lowest level we've seen since the 1960s. What would you do from Congress to grow high-paying jobs in the 13th District?
That's a great question. I think the 13th Congressional District is perfectly situated to create and train the workforce of the future. The University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign, the research park that's doing all kinds of great small business incubation is really inspiring. But also Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville, they have a great program. I had the opportunity opportunity to tour Parkland Community College recently to see all of the great technical skills and associate's degrees that they offer. And for folks that are interested in starting at a 2-year college and transitioning to 4 years, they have the Pathways program at Parkland where you can do just that. Richland is doing great work with their Enrich program. This is all incredibly important work to train the workforce of the future. It's definitely something, labor shortages is something that I'm definitely hearing a lot about in the 13th District. So we need to be in Congress really investing in workforce development. I think that's critically important, and I think we can do that through supporting union apprenticeship programs, community college job training, and four-year colleges at our universities. I think this district is uniquely situated to really lead on that.
All right.
Thank you.
And Regan.
I'm so glad you mentioned inflation, because the Biden administration and the Budzinski support that he got early on in his administration is fully responsible for the 50% increase in our inflationary numbers to date. So if we want to talk about good paying jobs, we've got to talk about lowering costs to make sure that those good paying jobs are not losing value in fact, their dollars. And my opponent has stood strong with the Inflation Reduction Act, which does nothing to reduce inflation and is big on passing large packages driving up these numbers.
All right, we're going to have to leave that one there. We've got a question for Nikki from a voter in East St. Louis.
Hi, my name is Denise Reeves, and I'm from Belleville, Illinois. And this question is addressed to Nikki Budzinski, and I would like to know how she plans to address the rise of fascism and the Christian nationalism on the far right.
All right, Nikki, your response.
Well, we do need to stand up, obviously, for our democracy and our values. I think we all saw what happened on January 6th as a real wake-up call to the extremes on one side of the party. And I think it's really important. You know, one of the questions that I get asked a lot, and is a question of this election cycle, is, was Joe Biden legitimately elected president? I think for most of us mainstream, common sense, moderate pragmatists, that's an easy answer to give. Yes, of course he was. My opponent, on the other hand, has never clearly answered that question, yes or no. I think those are the kind of things you need to be watching out for as a voter when we're looking at democracy and what's at stake, what happened on January 6th. My opponent had friends that were at the January 6th insurrection. And so I think it's really important that when we're looking at our democratic values and our principles, that we stand up for those. And I think that's no less than what's on the ballot right now in November.
All right, Regan, your response.
Well, I certainly think that Biden was given the keys to the kingdom and talked about being a president that was going to bring this country together. And I don't think in any stretch of the imagination, when he goes on national television and talks about half of the country, half of his constituents being fascists, we're doing any good service to our American unity here, especially in Central Illinois. As I travel the campaign trail, I am meeting people that have so much more in common than we do apart. We are here in the Midwest. We look out for one another. We talk about taking care of our neighbors. And when I am talking to people, I think they're less interested in what letter is behind your name and actually what you're going to do as far as making progress for our families. Here in Illinois, we have got skyrocketing inflation costs. We have families who can't decide if they want to put gas in the tank or groceries on the table. And that is a direct reflection of this Biden administration and their reckless spending. So I think that when we want to answer a question was previously before the break, what have I been doing here in Central Illinois to help working families? I live here. My family is here. I didn't drop in from Washington, D.C. to run for this congressional office. So I do know what our families are struggling with, and I do want to make sure that we are coming together as a community. We want to be able to feel safe in our communities. We want to be able to send our kids to great schools. We want to be able to have an economy that is successful for all. And that is what I'm going to do when I go to Washington, is make sure that I am the voice for Central Illinois, because it matters to me too. I want to stay here in Illinois as well.
Okay. Regan, we're going to stay with you. Illinois schools are now mandated to teach Black history from African civilizations to slavery and civil rights, as well as Asian American history. Republican lawmakers in some states have voted to ban these types of courses or take money away from schools that teach them. As a former educator, are you in favor of statewide mandates to teach these type of classes?
Well, I do think that Illinois has done a tremendous disservice to our education system over the last decades. I mean, we just were embarrassed in the Decatur public school system by a Wall Street Journal opinion article making the front page about how our reading and math scores, especially in low-income and minority students, is in the single digits. And that just can't be acceptable at this point. So while I absolutely recognize and honor that we do need to teach our history and we need to learn from our past, it's never been more obvious that we need to focus on the core issues of reading, writing, and math. I just attended the Champaign Retired Teachers Luncheon earlier today. Sorry you couldn't be there. And it was a great opportunity to know what our retired teachers are seeing as well. We want to make sure that we are creating a future and an education system that is creating great citizens. It's creating our future innovators, creating our future workforce. And so as a former educator, I do want to see balance in our school curriculum. I want to also make sure that parents have a voice. We have seen over the last 2 years parents feeling left behind, and we're having that lack of transparency. Local control belongs in our school systems, and they have the ability to choose what is the best curriculum for their students and what is the best way to educate their students. So I will continue to fight for my children in public school, and I will continue to fight for those in schools throughout Central Illinois and across this country.
Nikki, your response?
So I don't think it's the job of Congress to decide curriculum. I leave that with parents and with teachers. What I'm more concerned about is the learning gap that students have had over these last 2-3 years as we're coming out of COVID, getting them back up to the grade levels, the reading and math levels that they need to be in. In order to do that, we have to be fully investing in our public schools. And this is a big difference between my opponent and I. I will never support vouchers or universal school choice. I will always support public schools because those efforts are efforts to take money away from our public school system, and we can't afford that.
I'll have to stop you there. Thank you so much. Doug, you've got the next question.
And Nikki, this question is for you. General Motors and other automotive companies anticipate going fully electric by the mid-2030s. Rivian is already producing electric trucks in Bloomington, and a Decatur company is retooling its entire plant to produce compressors for the electric vehicle industry. What role should the federal government play with electric vehicles, and should taxpayer dollars be used for that?
So I think that what's happening in Central Illinois is very exciting when it comes to EV and the EV industry in Bloomington, and then in Decatur, as you mentioned, TCCI is now making compressors for those EV vehicles. Those are new jobs. That's a new industry. I think we need to be public-private partnerships to support that kind of innovation is what I would be supportive of in Congress. I think that leads to innovation. I think we have new industries and new opportunities that this district is uniquely situated to actually benefit from and create. And again, with a workforce training program through Richland or Parkland Community College, helping give people the opportunity to good paying jobs in a new industry like electric vehicle manufacturing. Charging stations is another one that, you know, a lot of charging stations are being built. They're being union built, which I think is also really important. Those again are creating good paying jobs in Central and Southern Illinois. And as we make this transition to a cleaner economy, we need to see the opportunity, and I think lean on public-private partnerships to create that opportunity for all of us.
Regan, your response.
Well, I had my neighbor recently zip me around in their electric vehicle, which was pretty thrilling. It's quite the smooth ride. It's not for me, but I absolutely understand the innovation and the workforce investment, especially here in Central Illinois, that's helping build some of those parts to continue to support that industry. My concern is that we are spending taxpayer dollars on credits for electric vehicles. We have a lot of middle and low income families in the 13th district that maybe barely have a paid off for gasoline car. So I don't think they're in a position to go afford a new $30,000 electric vehicle at this time.
Okay. Mark's got the next question.
This question is for Regan Deering. During the primary, we were talking about the tragedy at that school in Uvalde, Texas, where so many people were killed, teachers and students wounded in the elementary school. Since then, Illinois drew the national spotlight for a very similar occurrence on July 4th in Highland Park. One question is, would you support a ban on assault weapons, and what else would you do to keep tragedies like these from happening?
Well, that was a tragic day in Texas, and we are still seeing a number of mass shootings that are happening around this country. It did feel awful close to home when we were here watching that parade route tragedy in Highland Park. So I do know that the top of mind issue for many is what we can do to keep guns out of the hands of mentally unstable people and those that might take drastic action. I, as a parent, can only imagine the panic and the pain that is happening when we have lost control of situations like that. I am a strong supporter of the Second Amendment, and so I don't believe in a national assault rifle ban. There's questions around what that language means as far as knowing what an actual assault rifle means. And so I think that we have good laws on the books. I do know that it doesn't feel right for a lot in the law-abiding gun-owning community to continue to penalize them for the individual actions of a select few. And so I am not in support of a federal assault ban, but I do obviously applaud bipartisan efforts to make sure that we are strengthening and hardening security at our schools. My girls just this week had active intruder training. So we want to make sure that our local law enforcement and our school buildings are having a direct line of communication. We're making sure that our teachers and our students are prepared, and that I want those families to know that my heart is hurting for them and I will do everything I can.
Nikki, your response.
Yeah, this is another issue, a big difference, I think, between my opponent and I. And I will just say, on the day of the Uvalde shooting, my opponent posted not even thoughts and prayers to the families, but actually just her NRA rating. And I think that says a lot. I think that we need to be doing more in our communities to support gun sense safety legislation. I don't support military-style weapons. I do support the Second Amendment. I don't think those two are mutually exclusive. We don't need military-style weapons. And the fact of the matter is that in Highland Park, when children are trying to teach the adults
Nikki,
how to duck and hide, that's not right.
Brian Mackey, you've got the next question.
And I want to stay with the topic of gun violence for Nikki Budzinski. What would you do to address the sort of everyday gun violence that afflicts communities regularly across the 13th District, from East St. Louis through Springfield, Decatur, and Champaign-Urbana?
Well, it's a good question, because right here in Urbana-Champaign, on a per capita basis, they have more gun violence deaths than any other communities of the same size in the country. It's an epidemic. I had the opportunity in Decatur to listen in on a gun violence town hall. I think that we need a full community response to this. Obviously, guns is a part of it, the proliferation of illegal weapons. I do support the bipartisan gun legislation that would strengthen red flag laws, close the boyfriend loophole, strengthen universal background checks. I think those were good steps in the right direction on a bipartisan basis, but I also think we need to be creating more opportunity, after-school programs, supporting young people, listening to young people and what they need, because this is an epidemic that isn't just in Champaign-Urbana or Decatur. As you mentioned, it's in East St. Louis as well, and it's going to take all of the community coming together. It's actually something that really inspires me in running for office, is bringing people together to tackle big, important issues like this. I've done that throughout my career. It's something I'd be very interested in doing on gun violence in this district.
All right, Regan, your reply.
Well, certainly crime is top of mind for many throughout the 13th Congressional District, especially here in Champaign-Urbana. And I do know that the national rhetoric needs to be tamped down. We seem to be watching intense lawlessness happen around this country, and we have narratives that seem to be more pro-criminal and anti-police. That's just not creating an environment that is supporting our law enforcement. I did earn the endorsement of the FOP just this last week, and I do know that I will do everything I can in Congress to support fully funded police departments.
Right. And we've got a question for both of you from a first-time voter near Springfield.
Hello, my name is Colton, and I am a senior at Rochester High School. And my question for both of the candidates today is how they plan on dealing with an aging population in the United States of America, but more specifically in Illinois. I'm new to this whole politics affecting me thing, as I've just been given the right to vote, but healthcare has directly impacted my family, such as my grandma, who on this day, September 30th, just got her hip replaced, and I've definitely heard about it from those who I've spoken with on this topic. Health prices are rising, and people are finding it harder to afford the health care that they need. How do you suppose that your policies and your support could go to them and help them directly, if not indirectly?
Excellent question from Colton. And Regan, we're going to start with your answer first.
Well, Colton, you are right. We must take care of our seniors, especially here in Central Illinois, where they are facing a great uncertainty as we have record high inflation. They're trying to afford their medicines. They're trying to make sure that they can afford their rents, which are at a 40-year high. Despite the misinformation, am of course always going to support Social Security and Medicare for our aging populations. But as we continue to think about pension programs that might be going away, we also want to know that those families that are relying on their 401ks are not going to be terrified when they open their most recent quarterly statement and find that they are losing value in their retirements. It's very scary to our seniors. We want to make sure that we do have insurance policies that are appropriate for our individuals. We want to make sure that we have transparency in our healthcare systems. I've also had conversations with people about portability. We have a number of residents here in Illinois that rely on their employer-based insurance plans, and so we do want to make sure that we are having access to great health care. We want it to be affordable. We want to be able to do something like negotiate drug prices for Medicare recipients. So we want to continue to support that aging population, not only in their health care and Social Security benefits, but also making sure that our costs are tamped down and we stop the reckless spending that's in this Biden administration.
All right, Nikki, you also have 90 seconds to answer.
Okay, thanks. I am very concerned about seniors living on fixed incomes right now with rising costs. We hosted actually in Springfield a roundtable on insulin, and I heard the story of a woman named Mary in Springfield and how she's paying both not just for insulin and the exorbitant costs of insulin, but also chemotherapy treatment at the same time. Thousands of dollars for a senior that's living on fixed incomes is unsustainable. And so I want to go to Congress to fight to make sure that we are supporting Social Security and Medicare. My opponent is supported by Republicans that have already put out a manifesto saying if they take control of Congress, they're going to roll back the provision that allows for Medicare to negotiate for lower drug prices. That's helping seniors put money back in their pockets. It was also Republicans in Congress, these same that are supporting my opponent, that when Democrats wanted to cap the cost of insulin for not just seniors but for everyone, they stopped that in the United States Senate. Those are the kind of things that I would want to be fighting for our seniors that are living on fixed incomes and really struggling. We should be capping the cost of insulin when a vial of insulin costs less than $3 to produce, and we're capping it at $35. That should be plenty of money for big pharmaceutical companies to make a profit. This shouldn't be about profits and the skyrocketing profits that pharmaceutical companies are making right now. This should be about the seniors of Central and Southern Illinois that are struggling on fixed incomes and how they can keep more of the money that they have earned.
Okay, Doug, you have the next one.
And this one is for Regan. Regan, agriculture depends on inland waterways like the Mississippi and Illinois rivers. Many locks and dams in those rivers are decades old. Should the federal government make a bigger investment in fixing and repairing those locks and dams?
Well, agriculture is the #1 industry here in Central Illinois, and especially in the 13th Congressional District. And in earning the endorsement of the Illinois Farm Bureau, I have really had a great opportunity to visit a number of farms throughout our district that are sharing their concerns for me that we do have infrastructure that is failing. It seems as though Illinois seems to be left behind when we're talking about roads and bridges, especially in our rural communities, but also locks and dams. When we want to be able to get our goods to market, it's important that we have updated infrastructure. Of course, the infrastructure bill brought millions of dollars here to Illinois, and while I don't necessarily agree with a lot of the bloated spending that was in the infrastructure bill, I do appreciate those dollars that are coming right here to Illinois. We do just want to make sure that those grant dollars are available to our smaller and rural communities. They oftentimes are fighting against those same regulations as a larger urban area, and when talking to those small villages and mayors here throughout the 13th, we want to make sure that there aren't too many restrictions that are limiting their access to those infrastructure dollars. So farmers and the ag industry is absolutely going to need to continue to have that conversation about transportation and infrastructure if we want to have a continually booming economy and an ag industry here in Illinois.
All right, Nikki, your response.
So I don't think you can acknowledge the need for investment in infrastructure and then on the other hand say that you don't know that you'd support that investment. I think that we do need to be investing in our locks and dams, and it is critically important as Illinois is one of the number one ag exporters in the country. And in order to maintain that position, we need to be investing in infrastructure. We need to be investing in roads and bridges. That's what Senator Durbin and Representative Bustos did when they helped earmark and find money for locks and dams. That's critically important for our family farmers.
All right, time is up. Mark, you've got the next question.
This next question is for Regan Deering. Much of your personal wealth is tied up in the stock market. At the same time, members of Congress are coming under increasing scrutiny for how they've managed to grow their wealth while above market averages in many cases while they're in office. And members of Congress, as you know, get often inside information they might use to their advantage. Good government advocates are calling for members of Congress to an outright ban on trading stocks while in office, with the exception of a diversified mutual fund, perhaps. How would you manage your wealth in office to avoid any real or perceived conflict of interest? And would you vote for a ban on trading stocks in office?
Well, thank you for asking the question. I would, in fact, vote for a ban on stock trading while in office. I do have managed wealth and an investment in a number of industries. I don't think that all congressmen or women are looking to go to Washington to grow their wealth. I certainly am not. I am someone that has signed a term limits pledge. I think that when we are talking about being elected officials, it's important that our constituents know that we are going to work for them. We're going to go and talk about their concerns. I don't have any ties to special interest groups. My opponent talked about me receiving dollars from outside groups. I haven't taken any of those dollars, and she yet has a career that is built on working for consulting jobs for various industries here. She's had prior political experience working for perhaps the wealthiest elected official in the state of Illinois and maybe across this country. And so we can't be second guessing those that maybe have some personal wealth, that they are going to be disconnected from their communities and not in fact working for them. What we need to talk about today is helping our families when we are facing record high inflation. And so we want to make sure that those who are trying to accrue wealth and maybe potentially save are not having their savings depleted by out of control costs in just about everything here across the country. So I absolutely am in favor of maintaining that transparency as an elected official in Congress.
All right, Nikki, you have 90 seconds as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I have real doubt as to how much my opponent can really understand the struggles of working people every day. I have worked in the labor movement. I've been in firehouses. I've been on meat cutting floors. I know the dangerous work that working people did, and in the work of the career that I've had in helping to pass a $15 minimum wage for low-wage workers in the state of Illinois that got for the first time in 9 years a wage increase, I am proud of that work and being a part of that. I'm also proud of the ability that I've had to bring people together to get things done. When I chaired the Broadband Advisory Council, something that benefited working families in central and southern Illinois, we had Democrats and Republicans coming together. I'm proud of that work. To your question, though, Mark, I would support banning, allowing members of Congress to trade stocks. I think that there needs to be transparency. I very much support that. I also think we need to get big money out of politics. I think we should look at, how Citizens United has really changed the whole face of politics and raising money, and it shouldn't be about that. One of the best parts of running for office is actually being in the district and meeting with voters and listening to their concerns and thinking about what I might be able to do to help them. That's the best part of it. We need to get big money out of politics, and I think that could really start, and I think transparency is important, and that's why I support banning stock trading by members of Congress.
Excellent. All right, next question is for Brian.
And this one is for Regan Deering. Asked about the 2020 election outcome, you've said Joe Biden was approved by Congress to be serving as our president. And on that note, the House of Representatives, including 9 Republicans, recently voted to change the 135-year-old Electoral Count Act. These are changes aimed at preventing lawmakers from attempting to overturn the election results, as we saw on January 6th. Would you have voted yes or no, and why?
Well, I do understand as a voter in the 13th district the importance of democracy. Ever since I turned the age of 18, I have taken advantage of going to the ballot box. And over the last 10 years, I have been a voter here in the 13th Congressional District, unlike my opponent, who has just moved into this area to run for Congress. And I absolutely respect election results every time I cast my ballot. And I want to make sure that Americans across this country feel secure in their vote. We know that we need people to get out to the voting booths. We need to have them be heard. We have a number of ways. Early voting has already started, so it's important that we do have opportunities for every American to feel as they have access to voting and that their vote counts. Specifically when it comes to the Electoral College legislation, I think that we have a system in place that is working well. The Electoral College is in fact allowing for electors to represent their citizens throughout their state, and I don't think it needs to be changed at this time.
Did you have some clarification?
No, that's that.
Okay, all right. Nikki, your response.
I support efforts to make sure that our elections are secure and safe and that the will of the people is heard and respected. And that's why I think it's disturbing that we can't get a clear answer from my opponent as to whether Joe Biden was legitimately elected or not in November. What we saw on January 6th in that insurrection was a day when law officers died, when there were insurgents that were trying to overthrow the will of the people to the benefit of one person. That is not right, and we need to be standing up for democracy right now, and I think that's an important step in the right direction.
All right, and that's it for the questions. Now we're going to turn to the minute-long closing statements, and Regan, we're going to start with you.
Thank you all for joining us tonight and giving us the opportunity to share a little bit about ourselves and our policy positions and really what we want to see for the success in Illinois' 13th Congressional District. I've decided to run for Congress because I want to ensure that Illinois is a great place to live, work, and raise a family. And I live here and I want to stay here. I haven't made it my mission to move into the district like my opponent and bring along the Biden agenda with her. As your elected official, I want you to know that I am never going to forget who sent me to Washington and that I have been making it a priority to listen to you and hear your concerns. And when I go to Washington, I'm going to be your voice. And I think that we do have stark contrasts. We have a really great opportunity to send a new kind of representative to Washington, someone that hasn't spent their life in politics or working for special interest groups. I want you to know that I am a change agent and willing to go to Washington for you and take this country back.
All right, Nikki Budzinski, you've got 60 seconds.
Thank you for having me here tonight. I'm the proud granddaughter of a union painter and union public school teachers, and it's why I'm so proud to have been a part of the labor movement and fighting for working families my entire career. It's why I want to go to Congress and what I want to do. There are really important differences, as I think you've heard tonight on this stage. I very much support a woman's right to choose, and my opponent does not. I believe we need to find real ways right now for working people to keep more of what they earn because of rising costs. We need to tackle inflation, and Washington needs to be doing more, and I want to be that fighter to get those things done. It's what I've done my entire career, bringing people together, Democrats and Republicans, to get things done, whether it was working on broadband, bringing business and labor together to pass a $15 minimum wage. It's what we need more of in Washington, is less noise, more listening, getting things done for working people in Central and Southern Illinois. I would be proud to be your representative, and I'm asking for your support. Thank you so much.
Ladies, thank you very much. And that is it for the 13th Congressional District Debate. We'd like to thank the candidates Nikki Budzinski and Regan Deering for appearing on our stage tonight. Thank you so much. And to our journalists, we've got Brian Mackey, we've got Mark, and that guy down there on the end, no, just kidding, Doug Wolf from WAND. Early voting is underway in Illinois, so don't forget to vote between now and November 8th. From Illinois Public Media, I'm Tanisha Spain. Good night.